Welcome back to the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. In honor of Juneteenth, which was last week, Wayne State University is offering a genealogy workshop tomorrow, focusing on the lineage of enslaved Black Americans. To find out more, WDET's Brianna Tinsley spoke with Dr. Carolyn Carter. She's a historian and professional genealogist leading the workshop. Dr. Carter began this conversation by speaking about the importance of uncovering the history of slaveholders. She says that it's vital in order to trace the history of enslaved people.
In genealogy, we do something called tracing from the known to the unknown. You want to start with your story or the people who are there with you. And in searching our enslavers, it's kind of tricky because those stories were not documented by the enslaver. And so you want to research, you got to research the enslaver actually just as much as you research your own family to get to know that enslaver, because enslaved people were property. They had no rights. They were listed on the census just by a tick mark in male or female. So those stories, those histories have been lost. And so as you research the enslaver and find out who he was, because we were listed as property, many people have to go into their wills and their deeds and their will inventories to see if any of those enslaved people are named. Many times they left enslaved people to other relatives. They deeded them to other relatives upon their death. Or if it's an enslaver who has sympathized with his enslaved people, he will leave property to them or emancipate them upon his death. And so getting to know that enslaver is just as crucial as getting to know your own family.
There are many programs out there, like Ancestry.com, 23andMe. Mm-hmm. Are these the type of research that you also utilize as well in order to do these tracings, or is it different from taking a swab of spit?
If you're tracing, if you're talking about two different things.
Okay.
For the enslaver, if you're tracing your ancestry and you want to find the region that they're from, I use a DNA testing kit. If you are tracing them just to find out who they are, you don't start with the DNA. You start with where your ancestors lived. If they were enslaved, where were they enslaved? And then you have to do a little research, because when you are researching your family, you are putting them in the context of history. And so you're researching that place, what happened, if it's Virginia, if it's North Carolina, if it's a waterways where a ship would have docked, then you need to go to that city or that state, go to their archives, see what information they have there. In Virginia, they have a lot of information. It was a slave deportation and immigration, forced immigration dock, where people who came from the Middle Passage, they ended up in Virginia 1619. And you go there, they have a lot of resources. They have a lot of libraries. They have a lot of database where they have information. So you have to physically go to the place where your ancestors could have embarked on that slave ship. Now, keep in mind, not all of our ancestors were enslaved. Some of them were free. And if they came from a free state, then you find out where that free state is. And you can start by using the United States Census documents. It will give you a clue, but you can't always use those as a primary resource, because a lot of African-American family members and ancestors, they were afraid of the government. The first 5 censuses were taken by United States Marshals. And so we were afraid to give them our information. It wasn't until after emancipation and when the United States government realized that they weren't getting true information from these people. And so they hired and trained enumerators to take the United States Census. Because if you lived on a farm and I lived on a farm and you weren't at home and they came to my farm, because they got paid a penny a name, they would ask you who lives there. And if you had no relationship with me and did not know me, you made a guess. And that's what they put on the census document. They put nicknames, they put erroneous occupations. They did not know. And if you were living or visiting a relative the day that the census takers came, you were recorded as living in that home. So genealogy is detective work. You've got to figure out some things. You've got to listen and learn and understand history and understand your family, where they came from, how they migrated, when they migrated, who they are. I tell my students when I'm teaching a course that learn how to spell your ancestors' names incorrectly, because many of our ancestors were illiterate and they wrote things the way they sounded, not the way we spell them today. And so you don't want that to be a brick wall when you're searching for your ancestors. A lot of times, after emancipation, to distance their self from the enslaver, the enslaved person would change their last name. Some of them would add an E to the last name, which meant emancipation, emancipated. So it's so many nuances and things that a person who's starting this journey needs to consider. And I'll be talking about that in my session and giving people the tools and tips to get started and providing them with some examples of what I did and what I learned along this journey that I've been on for over 30 years. It's not something that happens overnight. Genealogy is an emotional journey, and you're going to find things that you didn't know. You're going to make discoveries that you didn't know that are going to be emotional, and you have to be ready and open and prepared for that. But I tell my students, assume all stories are false because you were not there. And so it's your job to find the truth in that journey.
Right, right. I want to come back to the tips and the things that you've learned along the way, but first I want to touch on what is. I know there's some who might not understand what the value might be behind doing this type of research for other people or even for themselves. Can you talk about what the value is there in learning your genealogy, learning your family history?
It's a sense of pride. It's legacy building. It's creating generational healing. And as you learn about your family and learn about some of the great things that they did, like I said, not all of our ancestors were enslaved, and our ancestors did phenomenal things, and forever, always understanding that they were building a legacy. We are here today because they endured the pain, the horror, the everything. We are here. We exist because they went through it. And so it's our job and responsibility to not lose that legacy, to understand that it's our responsibility now, particularly in the spaces that we're in today, where our history is being challenged. It's important that we know the truth of our history and those stories so that we can pass that information on to the younger generation. We lost so many people during the pandemic. And in the world of genealogy, we say when a person dies, it's like burning a library, and all that history and information goes with them. So why not, while they're here, talk to your relatives, talk to the people who you know are part of your family, and learn their story individually so that you can pass that information on to the next generation.
Yeah. There's a lot going on in this country politically. And especially for Americans, a lot of our identity is built around our racial makeup, our who we identify as. And as we know, if we were to take a look at this, some people might be surprised in what they might find in their history as well. Can you talk about what the value is there in knowing what your racial makeup is?
I'm going to give you an example. My great-grandfather was Jewish, was Irish and Black. My grandfather was Jewish and German. My great-grandmother is Native American and Black. My 4 times grandfather on my father's side, the paternal side, is Black, and he's Hispanic. And so I have a plethora of DNA in who I am. And so we must know and understand that close to 90% of African Americans in this country have European DNA. We may not want to acknowledge that, but we do, because when our ancestors came over here who were enslaved, they became children of the plantation, and often they were migrated and mixed with the European slave owners. So they had children. And so we, acknowledging that history and understanding that history and celebrating that history makes us who we are. We are diverse people. I'm a diverse person. I come from a culturally diverse background. And I think in knowing that, it helps me understand who I am. And when you know your history and learn who you are, you can move better in this world, because you have a sense of pride in those people who survived that Middle Passage, who survived being on a plantation, who survived Reconstruction and civil rights. To get to us, where we are here today, we are standing because we can tell the story. And so in telling that story, it's important that you learn that story.
So let's go back to the workshop. You mentioned there are different tips and tricks that people can use when they're researching themselves, specifically, changing the names, changing the spellings, thinking a little bit outside the box in that area. What are some other ways where people might hit a road bump and how they can overcome that when they're doing their search?
Well, there are roadblocks along the way as you are researching your ancestors. So it's not a straight line process. It's something that takes a lot of work, a lot of research, and you have to have patience. It's not going to happen overnight. Like I said, I've been on this journey for almost 30 years, and I still make discoveries. So you got to come into the whole process knowing and understanding that this is something that's going to be ongoing. Sometimes you'll put it down and you'll pick it up. You'll make discoveries. You'll reach out to people. So it's a process. It's not something that takes overnight. So you got to be willing to take that journey.
Can you give me an example of what people can expect if they decided to join your workshop?
Well, the first one is on the 25th, and then after that, we are discussing a series. It has not been developed yet. But in that session, what they will learn is they will learn my processes. They will learn how they can get started. I will provide them with resources, what they need to know, and how they can take this journey for themselves, and give them examples of some roadblocks that I incurred and how I overcame those roadblocks. I have this quote that I say, I am the hopes and dreams of my ancestors. And we all are. And we all are here because their lives mattered. Their stories mattered. And so it's important that we tell their stories.
That was historian and professional genealogist Dr. Carolyn Carter. She spoke with WDET's Brianna Tinsley. You can find out more about the genealogy workshop happening at Wayne State tomorrow by going to today.wayne.edu. Coming up next, transparency, tech, and tackling blight. Mayoral candidate Jonathan Barlow says he has the blueprint to transform Detroit. We'll hear from him next. This is The Metro on WDET. Stay with us.